Welcome once again to another episode of Working with Gen Z. Today, friends, we're going to talk about a topic which perhaps is relevant not just to the Gen Z generation, I believe, but maybe people across all different generations. And we're talking about the importance of creating meaningful relationships in life. And the focus of our episode today is to examine to see that do we feel that the Gen Z generation, at least in particular, is the generation where relationships are maybe not as strong as maybe the prior generation would have had? And is that so? If not, and if so, what are the reasons that could be leading to it? It's a generation which is very, very technology savvy. It's a generation which wants everything instantly. So how do we create this awareness or importance within them of creating meaningful relationships, not just in personal life, but certainly also in professional life, right? Because as you grow into a professional career, you are required to build relationships, certainly within the teams that you're working, but also with your customers, with your suppliers, with your other colleagues, with your other functions. And eventually that is what will help you to grow your career. But how do we help Gen Z realize that? So to help us have a conversation on that is our guest and our expert, Gunjan Trivedi. Gunjan has been with us on one of our prior episodes as well, which examines the anxiety and stress levels in the Gen Z generation. So today he is going to shed light on the symptoms and everything around the whole topic of relationships. So before I welcome Gunjan, just for the benefit of our viewers, to help know Gunjan's background, Gunjan has experience in developing and both working in developing and developed countries ranging from Japan, ASEAN, China, and of course India. With a master's degree in engineering and also marketing, he's now doing research in the area of health and well-being. He and his wife really run a wellness space in Ahmedabad and study the impact of mind, energy, and emotions on health and well-being. Gunjan leads this work via the Society for Energy and Emotions at the Wellness Space and collaborates with several institutes across India and outside. Some of them include the Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad, the Indian Institute of Public Health, Gandhinagar, Nirma University, and many others. He's also the member of Industry Advisory Board, Biomedical Engineering Department, LD Engineering College. And a fun fact, he has always been an active sports person. He led the cricket teams at Gujarat under 15, under 19, and at the university level. Also enjoys classical music and learning tabla. Gunjan, good morning and welcome.
Hi, Nikhil. Thank you for again calling me back. It's a pleasure to talk about what I do day in India.
Excellent. We have had such a very good response, Gunjan, and curiosity on the prior episode. And so it only makes sense to now talk about from our last topic, which was about anxiety, stress in this Gen Z generation, and how do people benefit from that? Now we want to talk about a slightly related topic as well, which I hope I think all of us, certainly as parents, can appreciate and may have seen it. But I also want to examine, since you work with many young people and people with different generations, this whole notion of relationships. And so today, let's talk about relationships. It seems, Gunjan, I will start the conversation by asking that it seems, again, that on a whole, uh, relationships are on a decline. And, maybe one can argue at different generations, but certainly within the Gen Z generation, because they're on the go, always happening. And this is both perhaps in a personal and the business context. So let's start by asking you that, do you see that? And if so, what are some of the symptoms which is leading to this?
So let me put a framework that we will use and I'm attempting to simplify. There are elements that enhance or increase the probability of better relationship, and there are elements which will sink the probability of better relationships. In other words, there are deal breakers which will have negative impact on the relationships, and there are enhancers which will increase the propensity of an individual who is involved or connecting as an individual in relationships. starting with fundamental requirements. And then somewhere there are double-edged swords, which can be either way, right? So if you do certain things, they can help or they may also dent the relationship. The relationship, first putting the structure on relationship is the ability of the individuals to connect effectively and thrive versus just connect. So there we look at synergy, symbiotic relationships, whatever we call it. So in general, and it is not first starting with generic perspective that post-COVID, the ability of people to connect with each other has changed. And in certain segments, it has declined. And today morning, we were talking about somebody and say, well, I don't like to go and meet people. And I want to learn how to meet. And this person is just a millennial, not a Gen Z. And the understanding was that even this happens, suddenly you want to run away from the room. This is what happens after COVID. People are sensitive to the risk of infection and so on. Now, what has happened is the isolation has caused some people to switch or focus more on virtual relationships, social media, digitized way of connecting. And so simple answer is yes. In general, not just in Gen Z, there is a decline in the way people connect. Okay, that's first point. Specific to Gen Z, they have certain barriers which are kind of lowering the propensity for better relationship, which is too much of digitization. Now, when you compare millennials versus Gen Z, and this is a cliche, I'm repeating it, millennials are comfortable with technology. Okay, Gen Z have innate capability with technology, which means they all are very well versed. So for them, there is a likelihood of increased usage of social media, and that has a negative impact on the relationship in general and specifically in Gen Z. If you look at research, they say that some of them use up to 8 hours a day, or they remain on social media. Now, we can debate whether it is work and leisure or just leisure. But we've done some work which says that the more people remain on social media, and it is a dose response, which means as the usage increases, it decreases well-being. Okay, so when there is increased social media usage, it is likely to have less human contact. I'm not talking just in person, less in touch with humans. So that is what I have observed. Yes.
Right. So, what are some of the symptoms? Are there other things? Again, of course, COVID made it difficult, perhaps because everybody was in the house. Uh, are there other things that do we attribute, or would you say is this strictly a post-COVID phenomenon? In other words, I look at it saying that even pre-COVID, that generation, especially this generation, seemed to be always, happy either by themselves or deal with people perhaps just as on a need basis. Correct? So.
Yes.
So curious if there is something else, would you say?
So pre-COVID also, you're right. There is a tendency to be self-happy, not need to connect, not inclined to indulge in relationships in terms of meeting people. And there are multiple reasons why that happens. Of course, technology is one of them. But even if you look at COVID, it's a stress zone for the entire world, not just Gen Z. And when you look back at how individuals grow up during the childhood time, they learn to pick up different elements that can either help in increasing relationship fulfillment or prevent. Let's take an example. Trust is an important element before you go into any relationship. So some of them are external, some of them are internal. First, I need to be having that ability to trust people and begin with that in mind. When I have seen a childhood or any individual Gen Z, for that matter, where you have not seen trust. So, father fighting with mother, or vice versa, intimate partner violence, or an environment where there is a lot of emotional abuse and neglect. Trust is missing. And this is common across Gen Zs when I work who have experienced such events. When there is no trust, they are less likely to meet up people. If the person cannot connect and trust the people in the home, it's likely that they will not connect effectively with people when they go outside. There
Mhm.
is psychological term for that, social anxiety, and so on. The bottom line is when Gen Z, who generally remain isolated in their technology, they get all the answers. So there's research that says they tend to more question the medical diagnosis compared to millennials and people of our generation,
Mhm.
because they believe they know the answer through what's available in social media, as general Google search, or specifically maybe they do the review of evidence. So that's one element where they believe they have answers, and therefore I don't need to go to a doctor or a lawyer or so and so. I can check and find out what's right, and therefore I don't need to connect.
Mhm.
When this happens day in and day out, yes, they probably get answers faster than we do. However, this increases their ability to depend on technology and not on people. And therefore, if I look at how my father traveled to Japan when this was 20 years ago, we would, at that time, the booking had started online, but he would say, no, 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 I will meet him. I said, we don't need to meet him. He said, no, I will meet him. We will discuss, we'll have tea, and then he will book it for us.
Sure.
And here I can see the details and see everything in details, and I can see we can book it. But he would prefer to connect with people. He would go and visit the doctor, or he would visit a travel agent, or visit an insurance agent, or an investment consultant. When you look back at today, for a Gen Z, it makes no sense, because they have that innate capability to get all the answers, including which mutual fund is 4 and 5 star rated. And I don't need to ask any expert. So this itself, in general, for Gen Z, prevents them from meeting people, because they don't see as much need as me or my parents saw, correct, when we were growing up. And second, if you add to this the issues that they face of lack of trust, lack of warmth, lack of an environment that creates ability to connect effectively and trust, these two combinations are very dangerous, and they definitely have a negative impact on the relationship. And I see that more in Gen Z compared to not millennials, but people who are 40s and 50s.
Right. No, excellent point. So it almost like what you are saying is like this iceberg. What you see on the top is maybe just the symptoms, but really what is happening underneath. And so this could be like, as you say, the history in a family of broken relationships or lack of trust, or and that carries through, or that builds that view for them as well on how relationships are seen. So, Gunjan, how do we help? In other words, how do we create or work with them or let them know in whether it's in personal capacity, either as parents or mentors, or even if you are a manager and you have to work with very young people who are very tech savvy, that relationship building takes time. And how do we it's a task, or it's rather a process which is requires patience, right? And that generation doesn't have as much patience. So first is to help them understand the importance of relationship, and second is to help them to know that it's much more of a longer process rather than something that they can expect to see immediately.
Yes. So first point I would say is they if I when I work with Gen Zs, including my kids, I highlight highlight to them the understanding that information is different from knowledge. So what we tend to get on digital media or books or research is certain information about various things. This is different from the higher understanding that we call knowledge. So if I have a specific issue or a medicine that I need to go to a doctor or a lawyer, I don't go and tell the doctor, give me this antibiotic. I
Right.
present my symptoms, and then the doctor decides. I may have information about what the symptoms would require, but that's different from the knowledge that the expert medical
Yes.
doctor has. What I believe Gen Z has is a good set of information and some knowledge. I'm not saying the knowledge is different from information. So if they can differentiate between information and knowledge and seek out or reach out to people and build relationship where the knowledge would help them grow faster, that would differentiate. their ability compared to those who don't do this. So this is one important element. And from operations or marketing or generally the corporate life, the term I learned from one of our presidents in Japan, Ravi Chaturvedi, was the knowledge-based leadership. So here again, from information-based to you go and ask the person who has the knowledge. Now, nobody will give you that answer overnight. You need to have a reasonable rapport, in other words, relationship with that person to be able to sit down and guide you to get you the knowledge that he or she has. I don't see that happening as often with Gen Z as, for example, Ravi Chaturvedi would do it, or I learn from some of those environments where ask the right person who has the knowledge. And why would they listen to you? Because we have a working relationship. So relationship is an essential element in knowledge exchange and transfer. It is not necessary in information exchange. And this differentiator, if I can educate the Gen Z or Gen Z begin to differentiate this, they will differentiate in their ability to generate a different outcome. So the difference between a Gen Z who seeks only information and who seeks information and pursues knowledge through relationship in the long term would be very clear that this group is more likely to succeed and more importantly feel fulfilled from within. Am I making sense?
Yeah, you make a very, very fine, subtle point that there is a distinction between information and knowledge, and first help them to know that difference. But for you to go from one to the other, they have access to a lot of information immediately on Google or any online, channel or whatever, right? But to make the information or the bridge to that is through people and the experiences, and that comes by interacting, comes by working with people, right? It's
the second point, correct. So that, and so here the essential thread is relationship. Right. If there is a relationship, then the knowledge transfer will happen. If there is no relationship and you're just stuck with a terabyte of information, it may work. It's not, I'm not saying smart people can figure it out, but if somebody has done that again and again and they know where it can work, where it may not work, at least based on their experience, why not tap onto that? And to tap onto that, you have to have that bridge that we call relationship. The effective way to reach out, they know who I am, I know them, and when I call, it's easy. And the second point is that for us, and the first point is more on the Gen Z to be able to differentiate. The second is that if we work with Gen Z, right, the key elements I would say is create an environment of trust. Whether they come from an environment there was no trust, then it or not needs to be differentiated. But assuming that is not known to us, create an environment that encourages trust and provides warmth, and also encourage in-person interactions. So I would do these three things: the trust, the warmth, and encourage interactions that may be on low risk activities, but challenge them to connect with people. So challenge them. So if I ask, I'm just taking simple example, my son to fill the paper, download it, do the needful and submit it, he will need some push, but he will do it. Right. If that involves reaching out to somebody, convincing them that I want to meet you, I want to seek your help, and I want you to fill this up, this will take much longer time for a Gen Z. Right. Because it involves connecting with people, setting appointments at the other person's own time. Two Gen Zs would connect and do it quickly. But when they go and reach out to people who are not innately capable with technology, comfortable with technology, then the whole thing will stop. Now, I'm just picking a very silly, simple example, but this is visible when you add up bricks, it makes a building. And when the fundamental building block has a blockage in terms of connecting with people, in person, seeking appointment, going out there to meet, sitting there, attending to what's the environment, who is coming to meet this person, what else is going on, all of this is generally blanked out because they tend to be more on the phone, and we do also. And this creates a barrier for them. So creating that trust, creating that warmth, and encouraging interactions which are in person will enable those bridges that create a relationship. And when there's a relationship, things move. Right. No, you're absolutely right. It's a continuous effort, perhaps on the part of the boss or a manager or as a parent or as a mentor, and it requires
creating the awareness and also make that, you know, that you create that environment of trust. And I know that you have mentioned, Gunjan, in our conversation that perhaps people who do have, you know, lasting relationship or good relationships, whether it's in a professional career or even in personal careers, in personal lives, right? They tend to be much more happier or experiencing more fulfillment, right? And so my next question is, have you work with people of different ages, and what have you seen? I mean, can you think of stories or examples from your corporate days or even now that okay, like okay, this is how this person was, and we've helped them, and therefore they realize the importance of a relationship, and gradually that change has happened. So any kind of a story or a example?
Yeah, a quick principle before the story is the idea of the Harvard research, Adam Grant, right, on givers and takers. I challenge the Gen Z to be both givers and takers, and predominantly givers. There is a tendency in the modern world to be just the takers. So when an employee joins us, the question he or she asks is, what's in it for me? What I have seen consistently is that when people deliver, the system takes care of the people who deliver. And that's what the givers and takers research say that, right? So talking about success stories, there are a couple of them that come to mind. One, a young guy came to me, lost, touted as very smart, very capable, but the scores and the results are not commensurate with what I heard. And this young boy was quite frustrated. He said, I'm not doing well. I should be doing well. Excuse me. And this is the context. And I use some simple tools with this guy. So I started by using the framework of 7 habits of highly effective people, which is a generic set of principles for success. And he seemed to like the idea of the big rocks, the first things first. So I said, what is the first thing first that you are not doing, which you could do? Now, in simple words, I said, what is your priority? What do you need to get that result? What is essential? So to get that essential item, what else do you need? And it boiled down to not going to bed on time. Okay. He discovered. We can see it, but for the person in the coaching framework we use, the person has to discover the real problem. So, I think if I hit the bed at 10, a lot of things will be sorted out. The issues where I don't go to tuitions or various activities on time, I don't go to school on time, I don't study because I spend time doing other things, and I don't wake up on time. Now, waking up, you can work hard, however, unless you sleep on time, you can't wake up. But this, I discovered it. And to my surprise, he started giving up the mobile device to the family and say, this is yours. Now,
Okay.
I wish somebody does it to me so that we save time. And that was a surprise. And the scores for sleep started getting better. Not only that, the person says, I finished a task that I could never finish in a specific time 3 months ago now, and I had spare time. Now, where is sleep? Where is mobile phone? Where is the task that the individual measured on completion? Now, you may ask me, where is the relationship here? I'll come to that.
Right,
This whole
right.
framework, right? Because these are all interconnected
Yeah.
elements. So, of course, the grades started getting better, and overall, the routine started. And this was not done by cutting the time on social media or YouTube specifically.
So first of all, why, how come, what led him to put the phone down? How was he convinced to do that? Let's understand that first. Then
what the boy discovered was that for me to sleep at 10 p.m., I need to give up my technology hour and a half back because there are other routines that I follow that need to happen in that hour and a half. And if there's a mobile phone, the 10 becomes 12. So mobile phone was given up, and then there was time that was used to refresh, study, prepare, so that the morning time routine is saved off the time robbers. Correct. When this happened, the boy would wake up fresh, and therefore the focus increased. So he didn't spend more time studying. He got more time out of the time he spent studying. The best part was with one of the caregivers, he felt that this caregiver was always angry with me. And therefore, there was a gap in the relationship. When we calibrated, we realized that the way the boy feels anger has changed now. And he feels more connected with the caregivers. And therefore, the whole environment in the home and the interactions within the family increased. So, only thing that repeatedly was focused was hitting the bed on time. And therefore, everything else you needed to do before that also happened. And now the environment is such that they begin to talk about what is the future, what else I can do. This was impossible because I'm stuck with my device and I'm doing something meaningful. I'm not wasting time. I'm doing something on, say, YouTube or listening to any good video, but it is impacting my ability to get up. My study was impacted, my results, and most importantly, the relationship was blocked. When everything else happened and the relationship opened up, the interaction started to happen, and that created possibilities which were otherwise not on the table. Is it making sense? So this is just about
So in that story, of course, de-addiction was a big contribution. But do you, I mean, if you see him now, or do you sense that that relationship has improved, or that he sees the value of relationships now slowly?
Yes, I think both. More of the first. The relationship has improved. I'm not sure if he still sees that as an essential.
Okay.
Okay, and that's a default with Gen Z because everything is available to them. If you look back at how, for example, you or I looked at universities globally or specifically in the US, we didn't have anything in digital form, which means we had to depend on several different publications, assuming they were available to us to decide. Here, they can zoom in on the road and look at the building and decide the faculty and see what research they do and what are the specializations. So why would they need three experts that you and I used to go regularly and meet, or people who came from there, we used to build a relationship and find a way to connect. So I understand why they don't need to meet.
Right.
However, it is not all as there has to be a shades of gray, right? There has to be a combination of relationship and self ability to gather the information and knowledge to some extent. The answer is somewhere in the optimum mix.
Right.
The information to find direction anywhere, you can primarily depend on technology today, not 30 years ago in India.
Right.
But to still understand where they would be successful, what environment in the foreign university, I think a knowledge of somebody who has been there or around would be adding significant value. Yes, most of the information is available, but when you combine that with the knowledge, that allows them to zoom in and focus, right? Second, it also provides a different framework, which is often missing when you are focused on gathering the information and knowledge through your own source or source of friends who think in the same way, right? So this is the one. The other success story is where, again, the relationship is a question mark, but when we had to do some work on Google Workplace, especially in complex setup of interconnecting several data sheets, Google Sheets, I was struggling. I have some background, but it took me a while. I was not enjoying because it became too much of my daily work. So I asked one of the Gen Z's, smart boy, who had a month and a half. I said, "You come and help," and he was excited to look at it. I realized that what I did in 4 weeks, he would do it in 2 days. Okay, and I didn't have to explain him much. Now, I was the bridge who understood the requirements and put it in the technical terms. At some point, I said, okay, go and talk to 4 people, gather the same which I have gathered, and make a model that you can digitize. And it didn't happen. Okay, so I kept on harping that that's one point. Second, the technology adoption was never the focus because there was no need to meet. And I was expected to be asked, can I work from home? I said, work from home is fine. But I don't need technology. I need people who can leverage technology to an outcome. So technology is present, but if I don't leverage it to an outcome, it's not going to help me or help the organization. And that required the interconnections or interactions between people and this young boy. That didn't happen naturally. And there were several reasons why there was no need, according to this young intern, to do that. And then I had to, so what I did was I showed him step by step and he started to discover. So by the time he was ready to go, he realized that I need to talk to people and I need to sit in front of them in the middle of people. But it took me a while. So if I see me struggling at this level in technology, and the guy can do it in like 1/50th of time. Well, on the other side, me, now of course, we need to be aware that my experience is different from a young person who's just graduated. However, there has to be an intention. I'm not measuring on the outcome, but the intention and the need to connect and develop the working relationship is essential. So I recall this brings me a memory of one of my boss's boss was in Singapore, and we were in a very tricky building construction project. And a local manager who was leading the country at that time realized the change in management and he says, I need to meet. And I was wondering, why need to meet? They don't know each other. But the first opportunity he had to visit Singapore, he met the boss in a special setup. He said, come and join me for breakfast. I need to know you. You need to know me because over next 1 year, we will work very, very closely. And that looking into the eyes is necessary so that when we call, we know what we are, who we are, what we're looking for. I don't see that happening as effectively with Gen Z. So this is one area where, and I'm not saying they need it all the time, but they need to be able to use it when they need to. And that doesn't seem to happen as often as what I have seen in my experience in different cultures, whether it's, when I tell people here sometimes when uh, they and I, or my communication is not effective. And I said, see, I have worked in an environment where people don't know my language. So I refuse to take the fact that I'm not effective in communication. Yes, of course, I can be better. So the ability to connect is necessary and it doesn't require language, it doesn't require technology. But that connection to just say hello, hi, you know who I am, I know who you are, these are my requirements. Are there any watch out from your side? Okay, it's not connected to work, it's just getting to know each other. I don't see that happening very often. And they are comfortable with technology, which we were not, and that's their strength. But it can become a weakness. That's where this is in the middle line, where it is not empowering in relationship, it doesn't break the relationship, but it can be both ways, depending on how you use it.
No, what a good example. I think I wish a lot of the young people who are join can learn from that, especially there is no forcing anybody to go and meet somebody. But in that story, as you mentioned, I'm sure the boss would have been very happy meeting this person, and that would have only made it better rather than having a name or just an email or working remotely or working only as required. So uh, and it's a slow process. So good to know, and thank you. So those other stories were also making sense. Now, one final point, Gunjan, here is that obviously it's a process, but even for the other generations, we know that relationships takes time. There could be conflicts in relationships and so on and so forth. So what could be any final words of advice in terms of what would you say you've seen? I mean, young Gen Zs, where you see that there is a change and there is a process. But of course, if you had to fast forward, right, and again as parents or even as teachers or even as bosses, right, I think how do we just any tips, final tips on how do we help them continue to shift their mindset, right, to say that it is not transactional. We will need to keep putting effort, right? Because the story that I always tell a lot of my friends is that my father used to always pick up this old book he had, a black book in which he had all the contacts of the people, and after his disability for many years he would simply call. He would probably never meet them, and he was active. And my brother and I would always talk to say that, okay, I mean, first of all, do we even have a list like this? Would we call, even if you don't call, let's say, 100 people, would we even call it 50 people, right? So I think our generation also probably, but at least our generation realizes that there is this need. So for that generation, anything else would you say? I mean, just
So first, I think they need to leverage the environment and the trust. Okay, the warmth. So we need to create that, and they need to start with trusting people. I know for some it doesn't come naturally, but that is necessary. Now, despite having that, there will be conflicts. For managing conflict, a relationship is a necessity, especially when you look at Asia compared to the West. We depend heavily on relationships and trust. Correct. And the conflict resolution assumes that there is a working relationship. It's like emotional bank account idea of Stephen Covey, that if you and I have a functional relationship and I goof up and don't show up for this show, you will not like it. But as long as that balanced emotional bank account is sufficient, it will go down. If I do it one more time, third time, you will say, who? I don't know him. Isn't it? So if they learn how to build that emotional bank account, that can be very healthy and useful in the time of conflict.
Right.
And this is often done when you give and take, right? You give more and take less, give more. Then you build the account. If you take more and not give, because there's no working relationship, the conflict time becomes very challenging. So on a normal day-to-day, it will be fine. But when there's a conflict and there's no emotional bank account because you don't know anybody, and you're just on the task focus, and we call it task focus versus relationship focus. And the combination is the key. Relationship comes in more handy when there's a conflict. So this is the second point, right? Third, the Gen Z tend to believe more on the evidence. So what differentiates information from knowledge for me is the consistency of evidence. If this information is backed by a lot of scientific evidence, then it kind of goes more towards knowledge. And Gen Z tend to use that. So it's not that they just look at information. There is more evidence-based approach. So for us to convince them, we need more and more of evidence-based approach that reassures them that what information they are pursuing and the decision is backed by scientific evidence. Correct. And I would expose them to global cultures.
Mm.
So there is a simple thing that I still ask is that if I pull my child out of a global school, North American school, will the child survive anywhere in the world? And the other question I ask is, if I pull them out of an Indian school, will they survive? I feel that they will survive anywhere in the world when you pull them out. And perhaps because of the negative exposure often they get and the challenges they face, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, when you get to be exposed to different styles, and India has enough. You go, you travel 500 kilometers in India and you will see different language, different culture. I would challenge them to travel, meet people. And there is enough in India. Or if it's global, then I would challenge them to look at and kind of embrace themselves in different cultures. It's the best learning experience. Going to buy milk. And I remember when I go to buy milk to make tea in Japan, we ended up with buttermilk and we didn't know. And that made us to learn how to read, how to interact, how to connect with people. Silly example. However, being able to get exposed in different cultures have a huge, huge possibility. Okay.
No, excellent point.
Yeah. And then finally, the social media detox daily as a compounding. Okay, because social media is good as long as we use them, mobile, social media. When they start to use us as their numbers, we have given up our, not just privacy, our ability, our time. And the time that we compound on building relationship will pay out. Long term, the time we lose on trivial technology, when technology is using us, is a drain that is going to pull us. And this is what will differentiate, according to me, for Gen Z, those who continue to use the technology for their advantage will win in the long term versus those who are allowing themselves to be used by the technology and social media will differentiate who moves forward more fulfilled. I'm not talking about the results, just the inner fulfillment that I have drained my time will show up in 20 years. And there is enough data in our own research, if you look at some of my videos, where incremental usage of mobile has a consistent decline in well-being, increase in anxiety, increase in depression, and of course, poor sleep. And sleep is a core element. It's going to become a big deal in next 20 years.
Mm-hmm. No, excellent, Gunjan. Great 3 tips. I mean, one, of course, you mentioned about the emotional bank credit. I think it's a very beautiful way of explaining that it's more about giving, and as you give more in the time of conflict or in the time of a difficult phase of life or in the time of a need, it's the credit that you build that helps. And I also like the example of exposing our children or the young Gen Zs to newer environments, whether within India. I mean, India itself is extremely diverse, but even outside, right? It forces you to appreciate dealing with people, meeting people, understanding them, and only then you get things done. And finally, of course, the detox of the social media, which I think it's an absolute kind of a no-brainer, and where you why you said that use it for your benefit rather than let the social media not use you, correct? So very nice. So once again, Gunjan, I think this has been very nice, very helpful, very useful to understand the concept of relationship. You've defined that. What are the symptoms? Some stories that you've shared. How can we build patience and sustain it? Where can the viewers find more information about the work that you do, whether it's with Gen Z and others? So I just want to, if you can share that, if there are any social media handles or sites, let's share that before we
So
continue.
most of this is through Riri's Instagram and Facebook handle, and you can search wellness space. You will find enough material on relationships, parenting, and also the whole environment, impact of the environment that we create for Gen Z, and its long-term impact on mental health, relationships, etc. There is a tendency for transactional relationship in Gen Z, and that's well documented, that can create long-term problem. It can have short-term benefits. So some of this is on our media, others there is enough material. I think the key, I believe, is this interaction, or the lives that really does. Sometimes that can be very impactful if people want to not ask, not be, people are not able to ask questions, but they want to see the interactions. Then a more live discussion like this is more effective than just a website or content.
Sure. No, absolutely. So I think, yes, thank you for that. I think people can look up the online resources, and I would completely agree. Nothing like a face-to-face interaction or in-person conversation about some of these things, but the videos can be, or your site can be a good starting point. So thank you once again, Gunjan. Really enjoyed.
Thank you.
And looking forward to seeing you in person very soon.
See you, Nikhil. Bye-bye. Bye.